Hello everyone! Welcome to a slightly different video from me today, and it's one that I feel really funny about making because I was very much brought up not talking about money. It's something that you just don't discuss. And as I've got older and more independent, I still feel that very strongly. I find it very hard, but then equally, I do feel it's very important, especially in sort of a work context and especially in sort of the self-employed industry. It is so important to talk about wages and, discuss all that's going on there because it's a place for people to be undervalued, shall we say. But I still find it very hard. I find it very hard. And so I'm not going to talk specifically about money today, but I am vaguely going to talk about it. And what I want to talk about specifically is where my money goes. As of December last year, I've been living, I would say alone, but obviously with Wayne. And although when I was living with my grandma, I certainly still contributed to costs, I now finally am really in charge of everything. And I've also had a more steady income in the last few months, and I felt finally, it's taken me a long time to get to this point, but ever so often I'm slightly better at spending money for my own pleasure. I've always been a save kind of gal, and I still very much am. I still really struggle even to buy myself a coffee as a treat. That is a big deal to me, but I've got ever so slightly better. The two things you may have noticed that I do spend money on are travel and theatre. Those are sort of my exceptions, but then anything else, like I will walk as opposed to taking public transport, I'll take a bus as opposed to getting the tube, like I will save money everywhere I can. But as I say, I finally feel like I've got a little tiny bit more relaxed in terms of spending money ever so slightly. Now, I've been wanting to make a video like this since last year, but I didn't think it was very fair because I knew that my costs were reduced by living with my grandma. And the whole time this year so far, obviously we're in July now, and I've really struggled to find a good period. I wanted to do it over 3 months, and I really struggled to find a good period of 3 months. And let me explain why. First of all, I only moved sort of mid-December, so January I was still very much like playing catch up in terms of organising this place and buying things for it. January and February, Wayne wasn't here yet, so even though we had this place together, I was still fronting a lot of the costs because I was the only one it wasn't split yet, if that makes sense. March is the only almost semi-normal month, but again, because that was the month when Wayne arrived, we then had a few more things that we wanted to buy for the flat, and so there's an increase in sort of house costs there. April, I would say, is sort of the first normal month, and May as well, maybe. I feel like there was something in one of those months, I can't remember what now. But then obviously in June, I was away for 2 weeks, my parents were here for a third, and so I had very few costs, which I'm very grateful for. So I've just stuck with the first 3 months of the year, and we're just bearing in mind, obviously, those slight discrepancies. And perhaps at the end of the year, I'll do a 6 month, sort of July to December, or I'll do a year, or who knows, we'll see. We'll do something. And I've split it into 8 categories, and they are rent, food, travel within London, so that's like stuff on my oyster, theatre, because that deserves its own category, travel, anything outside of London, so that's, any trips I made. I think I went to Ireland in January, I think I went to Holland in February, anything like that. Work, which is any costs being self-employed, you end up getting work costs. And sometimes I do include travel in that, but I don't think for the sake of this pie chart that I did. So I don't think there'll be too many. I know I had to do a DBS, I think, at some point. I can't even remember what that was for. But that's, for me, a work cost. I'm trying to think what else would be a work cost. Any lessons, potentially? I think maybe dance classes are included in that. If I had to pay for any other training or anything like that, that all falls into the work category. Then I've got going out, which is, not anything that isn't theatre. So if I went to the cinema, if I met up with friends and we went for a meal, drinks even, anything like that. And finally, other, which is, I think, also the house stuff. I don't think I made a separate category, which maybe I should have. But it's house stuff. It's every week I buy my grandma flowers for Shabbat. I can't really think of anything else that it could be, but it's, anything that doesn't fall into the other categories, more or less. So because obviously I'm not super comfortable sharing money and stuff, I'm just giving you the percentages. Each month, how much of my expenses went to what. Does that make sense? So this is no comparison to my income, which maybe will be a separate video at some point if I'm comfortable making that. It's honestly just, I spent X amount in January, where did all that money go? So let's have a look at January. Ta-da, my beautiful pie chart. So you can see rent is obviously by far the largest slice of pie. By the way, this is another reason I'm making this video. I think it's also really important to be transparent about London costs because London is madly expensive. It's probably one of the most expensive cities in the world, I would imagine. I don't know, but I would imagine. And I know that I'm very lucky. We were very lucky with this place. And so actually the rent is not as high as I was worried it would be. And my rent includes all my bills except internet, I think. And actually, I'm not sure if internet falls under work or other. I'm not sure where I put it because I do use the internet, obviously, a lot for work. So almost 2/3 of my expenses are just on rent, at least in January. We'll see if it's the same. I mean, the amount of rent hasn't gone up since I moved in, but it could be that the percentage of how much I spent each month changed. Next up, just under 5% is food. I'm going round, I'm not going like in order of biggest percentages. Maybe I should. Yeah, okay, I will. So rent is the biggest. Next up, we've got other. So again, this might be internet, this might be my phone bill. I'm not sure if they go into other or work, but it will definitely include house stuff. And I've also just remembered it probably includes things like Spotify and other memberships like that. Not that I have loads of memberships, but anything like that. So 14%, that's quite a lot. But I think that's bumped up by the house stuff. Then the next highest is travel within London. That's just having to top up my Oyster for work. Good fun. It's just part of living in London. But not far off that, we've got our work expenses, which is 7.2. I think this is the month I had to do my DBS, so I think it's slightly bigger than in other months. Next, theatre at 5.4%. I think I saw 2 shows in January, if I'm not mistaken. And one of them was definitely more expensive than I usually spend, but that's because Wayne and his brother came over and we just wanted to see a last minute show and that's what happened. Then coming in at just under 5%, we've got food, so just my shopping. Then at 3.8 is travel outside of London. As I say, I think I went to Ireland this month, so this would be any like flight costs. Actually, they may have been booked before January, they may have been booked in December, but it would be coaches to and from the airport, anything involved with the travel. Potentially, I also booked my travel to Holland then, although I can't remember if that was my cost or if someone else paid for that. And seeing as it's such a small percentage, I would guess probably not. And finally, I did not go out in January. I think I was away for some of it. I think I went to Ireland in January. Yes, of course, I flew New Year's Eve, so I must have been away for the first week or 10 days or something. So that is January. Let's see how it compares to February. So here, the rent slice has gone up by quite a lot, almost by 10%, is that right? 11? Yeah, by 11%, 11.6%. But obviously the rent itself didn't go up, so I just spent less money on other things. So the next biggest slice in February was travel within London. Again, just the cost of working in town. And then that's followed by other, which in this case I'm not sure what that other could be, except subscriptions or things like that. I don't think I had that many house costs. I went to Holland, so like I don't think there would have been a week of me not having any costs. So I don't really know what's happened there. But anyway, those are the 3 big slices and then everything else is very small this month. So next up we've got theatre at 2.6. I think this must have been just one show and it probably was around £20, maybe 25. Then equal, we've got travel outside of London. So again, that's probably just coaches to and from the airport and going out. I must have met up with a friend or 2 in February. I think maybe we got a coffee or something and that's what the 1.9% is. I don't know, that seems like a lot though. Maybe I went to the cinema? No, because Wayne wasn't here yet. I don't know. And then we've got food at 1.5%, which is a tiny, tiny amount. And I do think that probably has to do with the fact that I was in Holland for a week, but it's still very small. So I don't really know what that is or what's happened there. And then finally, I had no work costs in February. And on to March. Rent is even bigger in this month, which again, just means that I spent less money on other things. The next biggest is again, the travel in London. It costs a lot to commute to London. Again, we've got 9.8 on other, although as I say, this is the month Wayne got here, so maybe that's house stuff and whatnot. 5.2 on food, so it seems like my average is about 5% on food. I say average, we've looked at 3 months, but I don't know. February just seems like an anomaly. Now what's next? These are all very small. Theatre comes in next at 1.8. I can't remember what I saw in March, but probably something with Wayne, because he had time off, I think. Then going out at 1.1%. So that's again meeting up with friends. This is what I mean, like for me, going out has to be with friends because I will not spend money on myself. Like even when I go out with friends, I don't like spending money. I will buy the cheapest thing off the menu. I That's why I know that the going out has to be with friends, because it wouldn't be anything else, unless it's the cinema with Wayne, which might be possible. I can't remember, like, I don't know what it could be. Anyway, I had a very minor work cost of 0.8%. I'm not sure what that could be. I have no idea. Maybe a dance class? I don't know. And then I didn't travel outside of London, so 0% on that. And now I just want to look at the 3 months in total, the average percent I've spent on each item. So the average for rent is 65%, so almost 2/3 of my income consistently goes, not of my income, sorry, of what I spend goes on rent. In this pie chart, the next biggest slice is other. I do think that's an inaccurate reflection. I think that's got to do with the fact that I just moved. And I think if we look long term, that will be a lot smaller. And I think my travel in London will be a lot bigger, which is currently at 10% or 10.1. Next up, theatre. Oh no, that's not true. Next up, food. Food is at 3.9, although again, I presume my average is actually closer to 5%. I don't know what happened in February. Food 3.9, theatre 3.4. I wouldn't be surprised if sort of over the course of the year, if we look at bigger picture, that becomes bigger as well. Then work costs 3%, but again, I don't think that's totally right. I think the DBS at the start of the year probably bumped it up. Then travel outside of London, so Ireland, Holland, coaches basically. And finally going out at a tiny little 0.9%. And that, I wouldn't be surprised if it stays as small as that or even less over the course of the year. If things stay reasonably normal, I might do a sort of 6-month, July to December. I think that makes the most sense. I think that will be the most accurate. And then finally, I just wanted to have a quick look at the comparison of how much I spent in January compared to February compared to March. So it's pretty consistent. January is slightly bigger, and I think that's because I just moved, and I think March is obviously the next biggest. Oh, that's not true. That's funny. It looks to me like March is the next biggest, but actually, if you look at the figures, February is slightly bigger. And that doesn't totally make sense to me, because I would have thought February would be less. I would have thought there would be more costs in March. But I guess Wayne moved here in March, so maybe we split more of the costs then, and maybe that's why it's ever so slightly less. I don't really know. I'm just guessing, but that's just a bit of information about where my expenses go. I don't know if this is interesting to anyone, but I did want to share it, and let me know if it is of interest to you. Let me know if there's other things you would like to see or hear about, especially in terms of, you know, living in London and costs and all that jazz. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye!